Real quick, before we continue with the episode, I want to let you know that if you're a creative person who wants to share your creative gift or whatever you're passionate about with other people and create an online community, a podcast is an amazing way to do it. And you can start a podcast today with Anchor by Spotify. It's such an easy way to make a podcast. Trust me. I'm not a tech person and I did it. So if I can do it, honey, you can too, okay? Anchor has tools to allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. And you can host on Anchor and it will distribute your podcast to platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. So you don't have to worry about, uploading your podcast to all these different sites. And it's everything that you need to make a podcast in one place. And it's 100% free. So there you go. Let's go. Start your podcast, create your online community, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. All right, without further ado, let's continue. Welcome to the Creatively by Estelle podcast. I'm your host, Estella Berry, and I'm so glad that you're here. This show is all about being creative and pursuing your creative passions while you're in medical school or a professional program or grad program of any kind. Okay, you are welcome here. So let's start creating and let's get into this episode. Welcome back to the Creatively by Estelle podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode today. I'm just going to share real quick some things that I think you can start doing or thinking about if you're afraid of starting a creative pursuit in medical school, because I know that time and commitment and just, the overwhelm of starting something that you're interested in on the side can sometimes stop us from, looking into our creative passions or creative interests. So I just want to give you 3 things that I think you can start doing if you're afraid of starting a creative pursuit or a creative hobby in medical school. If there's any fear, here are just some things that I would do. So I'm going to jump into the episode. And before I do that, I just want to let you know that if you love this episode, definitely go ahead and share it with a friend. And I would just love to hear what your thoughts are about this topic as well. Let me know if you have any thoughts about it as well. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the episode. Okay, so what to do if you're afraid of starting a creative pursuit while you're in medical school? The first thing that I would say is to surrender your fear. And I'm speaking from the perspective of a Christian, as a follower of Christ, is that when you surrender your fears to God, when you surrender your fears to Him, trusting that He knows your fears and He knows your anxieties and He's able to carry that burden for you, then you're at least able to acknowledge that you have the fear first and foremost, and then you're able to release the burden of that from yourself to God. And I think that when we start with surrender, when we start with talking to God, going to God in prayer, going to God in our quiet time, and just letting Him know, this is what I'm afraid of. These are the things that I'm not sure of. These are the things that I think could happen. When you first put that out there to Him, not only is He able to then um, take that burden and the anxiety of those fears off of you, because then you've admitted it to Him and you can trust Him with it. But then you're also able to, like I said, look at it at face value, take it at face value, say it out loud, journal it, pray it, and then you're able to, at least once you admit your fear, then you can move forward from there. So I think surrendering it to Christ, surrendering it to God in prayer, knowing that He is able to take away the anxiety and the burden of that fear from you first and foremost, is the first thing that I would say to this. The second thing I would say, if you're afraid of starting a creative pursuit in medical school, is to confront your fear. So first thing was surrender. The second thing is confront. So confront that fear. And by that, I mean, what's the absolute worst that could happen? Like, worst case scenario, go all the way there. Like, what do you think is the absolute worst that can happen? Okay, so I give time to, my hobby or my love for painting. And oh, I just like am not able to finish anything and nothing gets done because I don't have enough time to give to the painting. So then what's the point? Okay, so that's one way to look at it. You could just, start projects and not finish them, and that would be disappointing to you. Or you could look at it as, okay, I get to take this time to do something that I really care about in my free time that relieves my stress, that helps me to focus when I'm studying because I've had a way to release all my anxiety and my stress through doing this thing that I love. You can see it as you've been able to make good use of your free time by doing something that is productive, doing something that you enjoy, doing something that is a stress relief for you. And that way, it's not so much about finishing a project or completing this or that all the time, but it's about enjoying the process of it. So that's one way that I think confronting your fears, or that's kind of like a way that you could walk through that confronting your fear, is that saying what's the worst thing that could happen, and then maybe choosing a different perspective, thinking about it in a different way. So that was one example. Another example of confronting your fear is, okay, what if I give attention to this creative pursuit and then I, give it too much time and I get distracted from school, I get distracted from studying, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's definitely a legitimate fear. And that's something that we should keep in mind as students because we don't want to be distracted from the rigorous study schedule that we all have for ourselves. But that goes back to what we've talked about in past episodes about time management, right? We can say, okay, I'm gonna commit a few. Well, it depends on what your schedule is, but you could say, okay, this weekend, this Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon, I'm gonna commit, like 30 minutes to doing this thing that I love to do. 30 minutes to working on this song, 30 minutes to working on this poem, or whatever it is that you love to do, and enjoying the process of it and really being in the moment at that time. And that way, you know that you've done the thing that you love to do and you haven't taken away from your study time because you planned ahead for it. And so that's just another way of confronting your fear, like what's the worst that could happen, and then maybe thinking of a different perspective, looking at it in a different way and trying to find a solution to that fear, if that makes sense. So that's the second thing that you can do if you're afraid of starting a creative pursuit in medical school, is to confront the fear and really say, what's the worst thing that can happen? And what's a way that I can look at this in a different way? How can I like kind of switch my perspective? Okay. And now the third thing that that I think you can do if you're afraid of starting any creative pursuit, any creative interest, hobbies, side hustle while you're in medical school is, well, to just act in spite of your fear. And this goes back to the last episode, actually, where we talked about just starting wherever you are. And I think that once you've surrendered your fear to God, once you've confronted and tried to change your perspective, now you can begin to act in spite of the fear. The fear might still be there because you're human and you're not perfect. So you might still have these moments of, oh, what if this happens? Or, oh, I'm not sure. You might have those moments of uncertainty. And when those moments come, you can start at the beginning of the list and surrender to God again, surrendering those fears again. Um, but the third thing to do for sure is to act in spite of your fear. And taking action is how you gain confidence. You weren't confident when you first started learning how to walk as a child, right? You had to try and fall down over and over again. Otherwise, we'd all be crawling, right? We had to. The more we did it, the more confident we got. Same thing with learning to drive, right? Like when you first were trying to drive to wherever you're going to, for me, it was driving to school in the mornings. It was like I would go so slowly, like the speed limit was not even a problem for me. So, because I was below the speed limit, okay. But over time, the more I did it, it became so easy for me. And now, and then I would like drive my sister to school too, taking the exact same route, even after I graduated. So literally now that that route in particular is so easy to drive for me, even though it's just because I've done it literally so many times. I could do it, half asleep. Not really. Don't do that. be careful when you're driving. But all that to say is that the more you do it, the more confident you get in your ability. And so just starting to do whatever it is that you love to do in spite of your fears after you surrendered, you've confronted it, you've looked at it in different perspectives. I would say starting to act. And I think this acting part can be broken down too into planning how you're going to act, planning, your time management, planning your schedule, and figuring out what your goals are. um, that's definitely part of it. And then taking the action. So, making the plan and then taking the action as well. And that all kind of goes along with this acting in spite of your fear. Because even taking the steps to make a plan, to do it, is already acting in spite of the fear. And so if that's where you need to start, then start there. Start with, okay, what can I do? What are some things that I can do to make sure that I'm able to pursue this creative interest without taking away from my studies, without taking away from my academic success, and yeah, and just taking that action from there in spite of the fear, because, like I said, we're all human. Those things are going to come up. But if we let that stop us, then at the end of the day, we have these gifts that God has given us. We have these passions, these interests, and we haven't used them, or we haven't been able to even look into them. You don't have to put your 100% all into it at this particular time in your life, but you can still give it, when you have the time, you can give it the attention that you're able to give it in that moment, because you love it and because it's a passion and because you've planned ahead of time that you're going to act in spite of your fear. So I hope that helps. The first thing, again, let me give a rundown for what to do if you're afraid of starting a creative pursuit while you're in medical school. The first thing I would say is to surrender that fear. I believe in the power of surrendering to Christ, because the Bible talks about how we should be anxious for nothing, but in everything, through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, that we should make our requests known to God, because He really does care. And so surrendering those fears to Him is the first place to start. That's how you're going to begin to trust Him, is when you surrender, when you turn to Him. That's how you begin to trust Him with every aspect of your life, including this. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is to confront your fears. Once you surrender them, you said them out loud, you can now confront them. What's the very worst that can happen? Go all the way to, like, what do you think is truly the worst thing that can happen? And then try to change your perspective and look at it in a different way. So first thing is surrender your fear. Second thing is confront your fear. And the third thing is to act in spite of your fear. Just start doing it. Begin to make a plan for how you want to pursue this creative interest on the side, and then start to act and start small. If you need help with how to start small or how to just start, I suggest going back to the episode before this, the previous episode. I think, actually, I'm just gonna say, just go back to the episode about just starting. That episode will really help you with this last one about acting in spite of fear. And I think that these tips will help you if you're really afraid of starting something creative in medical school. I hope this helps. And I hope it inspires you to know that you can do it. You can do it when you have the tools that you need, when you have the ability to surrender, to confront your fear, and then to act in spite of your fear, when you're able to plan, when you're able to manage your time. I really think that you can do it. I know that you can do it, actually, because I've seen other people do it, and I'm doing it myself by the grace of God. So let's do it together. And I hope this helps. Thank you so much for listening to every episode, any episode you listen to. Thank you for listening. And if you like them, like I said at the beginning, if you like this episode, please share it with someone who is in the same maybe year as you, semester as you. Maybe they are also creative in some sort of program, medical program, grad program, law school, whatever it is. Share it with them and give them some encouragement as well. And let me know what you think. What other topics would you like to discuss on the podcast? Let me know. And I look forward to hearing from you. All right. Thank you so much for listening again. I hope you know that you're so loved. I hope you know that you were created for a purpose, and your creative gifts are important, even in this time of your life. All right. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode. Real quick before you go, there is a Facebook page that I made called the Creatively Community, and I'd love for you to search that on Facebook and go ahead and like it, because I'm going to continue to post some content there, and we're going to make that into a group so we can keep building community, okay? So thanks so much again, and I'll see you next week.